You know, a lot of people move to Minnesota, and the reality is a number of them a few years later quietly leave the state. And this usually happens not because something went wrong, not because Minnesota failed them. It usually happens because the reality of living here becomes more and more clear over time, more so than it ever could have from research, arbitrary rankings, things like that. So in this video today, I'm going to pull back the curtain and reveal 3 patterns I personally have seen time and time again from people from all kinds of places in all walks of life that cause people to pull up and leave, and why it has a lot more to do with understanding than it does disappointment. People come to Minnesota for solid reasons, and if you've done any research, you know Minnesota looks very good on paper. We've got a very robust job market. We've got a video on that. We do very well on the cost of living. We do great on education, infrastructure, and we do very well on quality of life rankings. We also have a video on that. So on paper, Minnesota makes a lot of sense. And in many cases, it works. But it doesn't always. Someone leaves later, that doesn't mean the move failed or a bad idea. It usually means there was a mismatch between what they were expecting and what they got. Because people leave cities all the time, they leave states all the time, and movement by itself is not a regret. So what's interesting to me and why I'm making this video is what I have seen in both my personal and professional life. Different people, different backgrounds, after a few years here, can come to very, very similar realizations. That's really what this video is about. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern. We're not judging decisions. We're not talking you in and out of anything. We are just going to explain what we've noticed, what I have noticed, and why it keeps happening so you can avoid falling into that same trap. So in my experience, I have seen what I would call basically 3 main buckets where people's expectations do not line up with what they actually experience here in Minnesota. So we're going to talk about what I would call these 3 expectation traps, give you some thoughts and advice so frankly you can avoid them. And number 1's not going to surprise anybody. You can't talk about Minnesota without this, and that is the seasonal reality of winter. And just hear me out. Yes, most people definitely think they understand, winter before you get to Minnesota. You've heard of Minnesota. It's cold, it snows. We know, you guys know all this. What gets people and what surprises me, and this still gets to me as someone who is almost 46 years old and lived here my entire life, is the freaking length of winter, right? Winter here doesn't feel like a season. It feels like half of the year, and that's pretty much reality. People say, when is winter? For me, winter, you got November, December, January, February, March. For sure, you got those 5 months, right? April can really go either way. We've had plenty of days in Minnesota where it's 75 degrees on April 22nd, and on April 24th, it's snowing. So 5 to 6 months. Winter, I'm not trying to scare anyone off, but I'm trying to be real. Winter is gonna be 5 to 6 months out of the year. Understand that. It feels like a lot more this season. And it becomes a stretch of the year where it feels like the rules change. In January, by the time you get to January, February, you can go months and you have not seen a patch of bare pavement, let alone green grass. February, you're still scraping ice off the windshields. March, you've got a lot of places around the country celebrating spring and flowers coming up. Minnesota, often we still have snowpack on the ground and gray skies. We've already talked about April. That really starts to wear on people, and especially starts to wear on you if you were moving to Minnesota expecting to have this winter BS for 3 to 4 months, and suddenly you're finding 5.5 months in, it's still winter. Winter changes routines, it changes drive times, it changes how your everyday life functions. It really changes how spontaneous you can be. We're going to talk about that coming up. My name is Chris, by the way. I'm a real estate agent extraordinaire. Myself and business partner Trevor, we run one of the larger relocation teams here in the Twin Cities. If anything you see piques your interest or you have further questions, comments, maybe even sarcasm, contact info is all right here. It's also down below. Do not be afraid to reach out. On with the video. The second big thing I have seen, we'll call our second expectation trap, is the social culture and day-to-day life in Minnesota. And from my out-of-state friends and even my in-state friends, you could probably just rename this category Minnesota Nice. And boy, I have heard this one a lot from relocators. People in Minnesota are polite, they are friendly, they will straight up help you shovel, they will bring you a loaf of bread, they'll chat with you at the dog park. What people, I think, where the disconnect happens is, that friendliness, politeness doesn't translate into meaningful connections right away. Minnesota is a very relationship-orientated place. People look for it in their vendors. They look for it in their real estate agents. People want relationships. They don't just want transactions, and that shows up, right? A lot of people grew up here. A lot of people went to school here, and as a result, guess what? Their social circle and their friend groups were formed 20, 30, 50 years ago. What does that mean for newcomers? For newcomers, that means you're coming into a state that a lot of the time has established social circles, and you might even say boundaries. Everyone is nice. Here's the part you have to understand. Everyone's gonna be nice to you, but it's going to take a little time to actually feel legitimately included, right? This shows up in small ways. Invitations do not come quickly. Plans get made in advance. We talked about social circles established early. For some people, that's kind of comforting. For others, it can feel very isolating, and it's easy to take it personally. And this ties back into point number one, especially during these long months of winter where people naturally stay in more, they're associating with their established friends. If you are a newcomer in the state of Minnesota, those first couple winters can absolutely be challenging. You're going to be dealing with the winter. And I'm not going to call it social isolation, but you're going to be working to break through some of that stuff. And I think that's something you need to know if you're coming to Minnesota. That's the reverse side of Minnesota nice. People are going to be very nice to you. It's going to take a while to establish meaningful connections and friendships. Don't take it personally. Put yourself out there. Just understand it's Minnesota culture. The third and final thing that I have run into time and time again with relocators, what causes people to move into Minnesota and then a couple of years later be gone, is Minnesota's sneaky conservative social, not political, social culture. And here's what I mean by that. Minnesota, compared to a lot of the country, tends to rely and operate heavily on structure. Some of that is dictated by our lovely winter. Some of that is just the people, but we operate on structure. Weekdays are for school and work, and weekdays, things that happen in the evening, are primarily around supporting work and school activities. There is a clear line with the weekend versus weekdays in Minnesota. Weekends are where people, focus on activity, going to the bars, seeing the live music, activities, catching up. That does not happen so much on weekdays. And I know that's not the case around the country. Parts of Florida, California, Texas, you can go and find live music 7 nights a week. Not so much the case in Minnesota. Clear line between personal and work time most of the time. How people dress. Minnesota, whether you like it or not, tends to be a bit more on the conservative end. You go running around one of our lovely lakes in a sports bra, my lady friends. A lot of people are going to think nothing of it, and some people are going to think you should put more clothes on. Personally, I would say just ignore them, but that's one of those things. It's that semi-conservative Minnesota culture. You see it in priorities. Stability is valued here much more than spontaneity. Family is central. Minnesota family is a huge deal. Long-term planning matters more to most of us than does spontaneity. I'm not saying that's you. Again, things to just be aware of. So these aren't things that you notice when you come to visit your friends on the weekend, right? Because you're here on the weekend, you're getting a different slice of Minnesota life, plus you're in vacation mode. This stuff tends to show up when you're living on the inside in the day-to-day rhythm. And again, I've seen enough people have this reaction to the Minnesota culture. It's definitely something to be aware of and have on your radar before you pick up and move. If I'm trying to put a bow on this and sum it up, I think it would be something like this. And that is, people don't leave Minnesota because it suddenly stopped working or their priorities changed. They leave Minnesota because they finally understand what Minnesota actually is. And unfortunately, sometimes that understanding comes farther down the road after they moved than they wanted it to. That's why people leave Minnesota or any state. It's not the state failed them. It's not that priorities shifted. It was an expectation gap versus reality. And I'll be honest, the reality is, to some degree, you've got to live in a place to understand and really get a good feel for what day-to-day life is like. You visit anywhere on the weekends, common sense dictates you're probably not getting a super representative slice of life. So that's really the reason for this video. I have just seen these three things come up time and time again as things that get people to the state of Minnesota, and a couple years later they're leaving. In my experience, it's usually one of those three things. Wanted to share them with you guys. Out-of-state friends, what am I missing? You guys that have gone through this, you are going to have some really good pieces of advice that's probably not on my radar being a Minnesota native, so I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Local friends, same thing. What do we got going on here that's unique to us? Thanks again for watching. If you guys liked the video, please give me a like. It really helps us. Again, my name is Chris. Contact information is below if anything piqued your interest or I can answer anything for you. And we will see you guys on the next video real soon.